Welcome to They Live by Film, a platform dedicated to bringing you film discussion and interviews from around the world. I'm Adam Lundy, joined as always by Chris Haskell and Zach Bryant. Hello, gentlemen. How things?
Oh, it's
Hello.
going.
Hey. Have seen anything good recently? Anything you want to shout out before we get going?
Well, I was just gonna say we're recording this on December 11th, so it's just crazy to think how fast this year goes. What are y'all up to on Letterboxd so far for the year? Do you know?
Oh, I can
Is
check
that
it real quick. I'm on Letterboxd. I'm over 400.
I think I
oh,
know what I'm at, but I can't remember 100%. So let me just double check before I figure out. I'm
yeah,
definitely less than both you guys.
I'm
So,
at
I have
406.
okay, so and I think we've talked about this before. On Letterboxd, there's no way to separate shorts, right? So you have to have
oh,
shorts.
shorts are in there.
So including shorts, I'm at 415 this year.
Yeah, I'm
Okay, I
on
gotta
two.
catch
I'm
up.
on 253, so I'm well behind.
Well, you've had
Well,
like two sicknesses this year, and your job schedule's changed. So I think you have.
and I also don't really watch shorts, so I'm
Yeah.
not a cheater like you guys.
Hey, I don't have any shorts on mine. Mine's
Well,
406, legitimate.
it's like I've started doing this thing where if the Blu-ray that I'm watching has a short on it, I'll watch it just just out of curiosity to see what's part of the supplement. So
Yeah, there's no harm.
yeah. So anyways, I've never crossed 450 400 before, but I don't really feel too proud of that because I know it's at least 30 shorts. I don't know exactly how many, but yeah, I saw some movies from 88 Films. Have y'all ever seen anything from them?
I've seen their
Yeah,
like stuff, but I've never owned any.
I have a couple of their kung fu movies, their Shaw Brothers
Their
ones.
releases are fantastic. Like I just watched a movie called On the Run, which is like I don't know if maybe technically like a really violent neo-noir. Maybe it's got a lot of crime elements to it. It's not a kung fu film from Hong Kong. It's more of a crime film. It's probably somewhere closer to like Hard Boiled or like that. And it has some of the most like it's really hard to talk about it without giving away spoilers. It's just there's a lot of deaths in the movie of like close people to the different members. It's just funny. It's so tragic it becomes funny because it's just like like everybody close to people just like drop off and you're like, seriously? Another one? um but then Zach, this is something you talked about a while ago. I saw Ashken, The Charmed Ring and Other Stories. I can't remember. Did we talk about this last time we recorded? We did not, right? Or
I'm
did we
trying
talk?
to
No, I don't think
I
so.
don't think I've seen
That's what I
that.
recall.
Um, wow. I was so close to suggesting that we see all four of Sharon Mokri films in that one. Because that movie's great. Like it made me feel the exact same way that I felt the first time I saw Memento when I was in like college. And it plays with time and you're like it's a non-linear storytelling style. And all those different threads kind of come together and right when when they don't seem like they will, I guess, for most of the movie. It's really, really well done. It's another Iranian filmmaker. I know we've talked about him in the past. I think it was
Yeah,
months ago.
I
You brought it
misunderstood
up.
what you said. I
Yeah,
know who you're talking about now. I for some reason I heard something else. Yeah, I've seen two of his films. I haven't seen the other two yet.
Yeah. Anyways,
yeah, we did
it's
bring up the box set before. Yeah, was it from Arabalas?
Deaf Crocodile.
Death
yeah,
Crocodile. Yeah, but yeah.
and it's great. What about you? What about y'all?
Well, I've been trying to. My goal for December is I started out with this idea that I was going to go through like 25 horror films for Christmas related horror films. Then I started making the list and realized this is going to start sucking after a while. So I decided to instead do kind of a 12 days of Christmas. I just got to watch 12 movies before Christmas that are genre horror related. So
Okay,
as so far this month, I've gotten to six. First one I did,
nice.
I started with one of my favorites, which is the Black Christmas remake from 2006. It's like a
Uh-huh.
yearly watch for me at this point. Uh,
Uh-huh.
Great, colorful film. It's overhated. I will defend it to my dying breath. And then there was Fat Man, which was a 2020 film with Mel Gibson and Walton Goggins. That was okay. Honestly, it seems a lot like what Violent Night is supposed to be this year. I enjoyed it though.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I mean it was fun. It was fun enough. Then there's the one I watched. That's been kind of been the biggest surprise is Christmas Evil. I had never seen it, and honestly, it's because I kind of thought it was going to be like Silent Night, Deadly Night, which I don't really care that much about. I think it's kind of fine. But I was really impressed with like Christmas Evil because it's a lot closer to something like Maniac. Like it's a very much a character study of this guy who had such a bad experience when he was a kid, and he just wants to believe in the spirit of Christmas so bad that it just like ends up causing him to do pretty horrible things.
Okay.
Really great. I really enjoyed that one. Then I rewatched The Green Knight, which people will argue is not horror. I don't care. I'm adding it. It's great. Not a big David Lowery fan in a lot of ways because I think A Ghost Story is pretentious drivel. But this one's not. This one's really good. It's a great King Arthur tale. Watch Christmas Bloody Christmas, which could have been better if the animatronic Santa was not just a guy dressed up as Santa that they put like animatronic sounds towards. Really beautifully shot film, but that really loses it, and the dialogue's very Rob Zombie-ish,
Okay.
and not in a good or charming way. And the final part I'm at now is The Leech, which I watched on the Arrow Player, which is kind of an odd couple story in the worst possible way. It's a good movie though. Basically, it's about like this priest who his church is dying, his Catholic church is dying, so he finds this bum outside who asks him for a ride, and he just keeps like leeching off of him, and they kind of bring out the worst qualities of one another. And it's kind of like that, like Mother, the Aronofsky film, but not as metaphorical and a lot more fun. So that is where I'm at my six so far, 6 to go. What about you, Adam?
So I've just been like knocking a few films off the Sight and Sound lists, the critics one and the directors one. So watched Killer of Sheep, Charles Burnett film. It was pretty interesting. It was just kind of like in the style of like Italian neorealist, but like set in like Los Angeles, sort of like the Crenshaw, that kind of region of LA, that sort of poor region. It was pretty okay. It's very vigneted. It's not really like a cohesive story. So kind of like some scenes are better than others in that kind of way. I saw the Bresson film L'Argent, pretty good, about this fake banknote and how it completely ruins this dude's life, but like it kind of shows how it got between, from one person to another person to another person. And it's just all about how people are assholes, especially when it comes to money. So it's pretty good. I saw the fabled Jean Dielman. Watched it. I liked it. It was pretty good. For a film that I thought would be very tedious, the 3.5 hours honestly did kind of fly by. It's really, really meditative. Kind of just, you wouldn't think that watching a woman make a meatloaf would be all that interesting, but it was pretty engaging for what it was. And then I watched another longer film, Celine and Julie Go Boating, the Jacques Rivette film. It was my first Jacques Rivette film. I avoided it so long because all of his films are so fucking long. This is another 3.5 hour film, I should say. But yeah, it was pretty good. I didn't love it, but it was wild. So much crazy shit happens. It's kind of like a elongated David Lynch film through the eyes of Eric Romer. It's pretty batshit. It's really, really wild ride. So if you have 3.5 hours to spare and want to watch some weird quasi Alice in Wonderland meets murder mystery meets generic 70s French stuff, maybe it's the film for you. But then I watched the film yesterday and I haven't stopped thinking about it since. It kept me up last night thinking about it. And it's the new Park Chan-wook film, Decision to Leave. It's the best film I've seen this year. It's so good.
It's
the
on my
end.
list to watch, but I want to watch Handmaiden first. Like I know they're not directly related, but I
The
feel like
Handmaiden's the only other Park Chan Wook film I've seen. I like that one as well. It's pretty good. I prefer Decision to Leave, but The Handmaiden's also very good. It has they're both kind of similar in terms of like they have a lot of twists and turns along the way and stuff. But yeah, Decision to Leave, it floored me. The ending absolutely broke me. It's great film. I highly recommend watching it. I think it's now streaming through Mubi worldwide, or at least in a lot of different regions.
Okay.
So if you're a Mubi subscriber, it might be worth checking if it's there. That's where I watched it on Mubi, and I'm 99% sure I read that they have the streaming rights in the US as well. So if you're looking to watch it soon, go to Mubi. They are not affiliated with this podcast, but if they want to become affiliated with us, that's fine also. Yeah, that's what I've been up to. So yeah, Decision to Leave, definitely the best 2022 film I've seen this year, but I'm still a bit behind on 2022 releases because I don't get to the theater very often. So I'm still waiting to see Banshees of Inisherin, and probably the other film I'm really anticipating is After Sun. That another movie release. So I'm anticipating that. I think that's streaming next week. So I'll be looking forward to watching that one as well. Maybe I'll be talking about all of them in our wrap-up episode in a few weeks' time.
Oh, nice.
what was the name of the one about the banknote? I missed what the name of that.
L'Argent, so it's in French, so it's L, L sort of, the little comma thing, the upside down comma.
Okay.
Argent, L'Argent.
Oh, found it. Thank you.
Yeah. There's two films called L'Argent. One's from like the 30s. It's not that one. This one's from 1983.
Yep. The Bresson one. Yep. For Bresson.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. See, that's
Bresson.
yeah.
Song. Yeah, it's good. It's a good film. It's just really it's a film that showcases how scummy humans can be over the course of 80 odd minutes.
Cool. I'm into it. I might check that out soon because it's on HBO Max as well.
Yeah, and it's on the Criterion Channel also. And I think pretty much all of these, apart from all of the ones I mentioned for the Sight and Sound, apart from Killer of Sheep, are on the Criterion Channel. So L'Argent, John Diamond, and Selena and Julie Go Pudding are all on the Criterion Channel.
I have a question for y'all that's not related to the Sight and Sound top 250. But oh, by the way, Adam, how far are you on the list now as far as percentage complete?
I'll double check.
Because you had, was it only like 10 or 15 that you had not seen? Something like that you had seen?
On the critics list, I'm now on 86 out of 100.
Oh, 86 out of 100. Okay, that's awesome.
The 250 apparently the 250 that was out in 2012 wasn't even official. That was just some dude who happened to have all the ballots kind of made it and expanded it. So as far as I'm aware, from what I can find, we're only going to be getting a 100. There's not going to be a 250 list this year.
That's kind of disappointing, to be honest.
Or that same person will just make another 250.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, in terms of what BFI are putting out anyway.
So BFI's never done an official 250.
As far as I can find, no, they've always ever just done a top 100. From what I was reading, because people were asking in different groups that I'm in, when's the 250 coming out? And someone has said that the 250 was just something a dude put together. It wasn't officially done by BFI. It was just something that a guy who had all the ballots put together and put on Letterboxd. So yeah, maybe he'll do it again. Who knows? But we'll have to wait and find out.
It's kind of cool that Letterboxd uses that on their stats page as well.
Yeah, exactly.
List. That's interesting.
Yeah,
that's a good point. So not necessarily a critics 250, but certainly up there for a lot of people are the Lord of the Rings films. And I'm going through that 100 film set from Warner Brothers. I'm all the way up to 92 now. So I've seen 92 of the best Warner Brothers films throughout the year, and I'm on track to finish all 100. 91, 92, and 93 are the Lord of the Rings films. So I'm just curious, we may have spoken about this before, but do y'all have a favorite?
Two Towers, 100%.
Two Towers as well.
Oh, I thought that was going to be controversial. Yeah, I'm the same. I just realized I'm the same.
I don't know why it's the lowest on every ranked list, but it has help. It has everything.
Helm's Deep is like the best action fight movie, whatever battle scene in history. So yeah, Helm's Deep.
It is, and I also think it's the tightest story of the three. Like I didn't realize,
Yeah.
all the problems with Return of the King about how it doesn't end. That also happens in Fellowship of the Ring a little bit, not to the same degree, but there's like at least four endings where it's like, I mean, I know it's in the book, but you're just kind of like, oh, okay, there's 45 minutes still.
Yeah.
Okay, there's 30 minutes. Anyways, yeah. So yeah, Two Towers for me as well.
For me, like when you come, I'll try not to get us on a Lord of the Rings tangent because I can go on forever. But like all three kind of for me capture something different. Like if I want something very whimsical, it's Fellowship. Like every
Sure.
time, Fellowship is great for that. It's the most whimsical of the three to me. If I want like the best emotional core, I really do go to Return. Like I think it's got the best emotion. Like it's going to be the one that makes me like just emotional, I guess is the word, just to reuse that word about 8 times. But Two Towers, I just think is the best one of all of them. Like it's just the most consistent. I think it's the one that flies by, even on like the extended edition. It's like 4 hours, 3.5, 4 hours. It doesn't feel that way. I can watch it all the time.
Yeah, it has the reveal of Gandalf the White, which is just an awesome moment, the way they did it. The battle at Helm's Deep, you're right. And there's like there's that feeling when they it's the Riders of Rohirrim. Anyways, when those extra people come over the hill with Gandalf at the end
Mhm.
and help in the battle, it's kind of hard to beat that moment. It's at least in the series, if not throughout film in general. That's just a really powerful moment of hope, and like I think they really nailed the like the feeling they were going for there.
Yeah, I'll never quite like every time I see it like on a ranked list, like on like the big ones, not anyone's particular one, but like I think it's on IMDb, it's the last one. I think on Letterboxd, it's the last one. Um, I'm sure there's other lists I'm just blanking out on, but that always seems to be the bottom one of the three.
Yeah, they shoot pictures as well. It's outside of the top 1,000. But anyways, yeah, it's fresh for me, so I thought I would ask because I hadn't seen those in a minute. But Two Towers is where it's at. Team Two Towers here.
We could be a Two Towers podcast now.
We are
We can
officially
talk about-
sponsored by Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers.
Brought to you by New Zealand. All right, go ahead. Let's dive in, y'all. But thanks for that little detour. I was just I forgot to ask that earlier.
No problem. So yeah, as we mentioned at the end of the last sort of discussion episode, today we are going to be watching some snow westerns. So it's worked out super lucky for me because I was going to be picking Day of the Outlaw, which is going to be our first film today, which I'll give a bit more detail in a second. And I was thinking about what I'd pair that up with. It would just be like a normal western, and then I saw the list of films that Criterion were announcing for the month, and that they were having a snow western month. So it's like, okay, that just like worked out perfectly in my favor. Let me just choose one of these to go along with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I mentioned, the first one we're going to be watching is Day of the Outlaw. It's from 1959 from a director called André de Toth, which Zach shared an image of him the other day. And listeners, look up André de Toth. He is the manliest man to ever exist. He looks like he eats cement for breakfast. To give you a bit of an overview of the film from Letterboxd, they say that Blaze Starrett is a rancher at odds with homesteaders when outlaws hold up the small town. The outlaws are held in check only by their notorious leader, but he is diagnosed with a fatal wound and the town is a powder keg waiting to blow. Chris, how are we looking on Sight and Sound on They Shoot Pictures for this one?
I'm gonna tip my hand a little bit. Way too low. So this is the 2,586th film of all time.
Nah.
Way too low. So I think it's right up next to Nightmare Alley, for example. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. It's in good company, but way too low for me.
Yeah, this is better than Nightmare Alley for me anyway.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, so the last time we spoke, I've seen this before and I've mentioned it on innumerable episodes of the podcast in passing. So I was so glad that we actually eventually got to watch it together. I originally saw this, and you guys will probably pick up on this when you watched it. I originally saw this on the Criterion channel about 2 years ago now in a particular program they were running called Western Noirs. So you guys probably picked up this is not like your typical Western film, and the next film kind of ties into that a little bit as well.
Mhm.
This is very much essentially a film noir in a Western setting. It's not really about, you know, hitting the frontier and all that John Ford crap about sort of exploration and all this stuff. It's very much a very much a character piece, very much a chamber piece almost. That kind of all takes place mostly just within buildings, but then obviously does expand towards the end. But yeah, I freaking love this film. I was really surprised when I went to go rate it again after watching it again. I don't know why, but I gave it 3.5 stars, even though I've had nothing but good things to say about it since watching it. So I don't know what I was on that day. I don't know if I misclicked or something when I first rated this film. But it bumped all the way up to 4.5 stars this time around. I think it's just an awesome film.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say about it.
So I'll kind of go for mine. So I know you've talked about this film plenty, and I'm sure you told me what the film was about. And honestly, it's been a while since, so I forgot. So I just went in. I was like, I have no idea what this is really about, besides it being a snow western. And so when it starts out with like, this little dispute about barbed wire fences, I was into it. I was like, oh man, this is kind of interesting to go like this low stakes, but I'm like actually into whatever drama this is. Like it's a little melodrama with like the guy's wife and him and stuff like that. And I'm like, but hey, I can go with this. And then so when the outlaws actually like come in and the bottle breaks, that where they're about to time this big shootout part, I was like, oh, we're going 100% different direction. So that was just like kind of a fun experience for me. It's kind of
Yeah.
that nice thing of not really knowing what's going to happen, and it makes it that little bit more fun.
Yeah, that was exactly my experience too. I was like, okay, I see. This could be interesting. I get it. Oh, it's gonna be really good. Did y'all get Hateful Eight vibes from this? This had to influence that movie, right?
I was going to talk about Hateful Eight in a bit, but yeah.
That's actually the only Tarantino film I've never seen.
I mean, it's very similar.
Okay,
It's
so I don't have to watch it then because Tarantino probably ripped it all from this.
Well, the one thing I'll say is I always had this thing of like, why? Like, I like Hateful Eight. I think it's fun. I think Walton Goggins is definitely the highlight of the film. But like, what it always kind of held back for me is he makes a big deal about shooting in 70 millimeter, which is great. I love 70 millimeter,
Mhm, mhm,
but it takes place in one location inside. So it almost
Mhm.
feels wasted. Like it's kind of a funny joke to use 70 millimeter and basically Reservoir Dogs.
uh-huh.
But I watched this film like Day of the Outlaw, where it has such this beautiful like landscape and cinematography, and I'm like, this would look so good in 70.
That's
Yeah.
true.
This would look fantastic.
I was thinking, because well, we haven't mentioned the name of the other film yet, but that has a few shots of like, I guess they must have used a helicopter, but where you actually get to kind of see like where they're at, like the whole landscape. And I wish they would have done that here, because I think the way they shot this film, it had better cinematography as far as from like the bleakness, like the vastness of the snow. Like I think the way they use that here, it would have been cool to have like, or if they had drones nowadays, where you could have like really seen where they were at and like zoom. I don't know if it would have fit for this story, but I wanted to see more of the snow because it was so like oppressive. It was such a part of the environment, such a part of the story. And then the other thing I feel like I just have to call out. So the main bad guy is Burl Ives, right? The character's name is Jack Brune.
But this is the thing. Like when we talk about good guys and bad guys in this film, it's so gray. Technically, yes, the leader of the outlaws is Captain Bruin, the sort of ex-war captain.
But I would definitely say Tex and Pace are the villains of this group.
Yeah, this is the
Yeah.
thing. This is the thing when we
Yeah.
get to this film. It's not all very black and white about who's the villains and the bad and the good guys and the bad guys and stuff. But yeah, Bird Eyes is the leader of the outlaws.
Great point, and I can't wait till we get into that discussion. I don't think I've really like I've recognized the face. I'm sure I've seen him and stuff, but I haven't like really seen him in a leading role like this, at least that I can think of. that guy is a hell of an actor. Like,
Yeah, I'm looking at his credits. Like he didn't have a lot of credits, but I haven't seen him in anything else, but I recognize there's a lot of famous films on this list. East of Eden, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, White Dog.
sure,
So yeah, you might have seen him in one of those, maybe.
he is. I mean, there's a lot of good performances in this, but I think for me, he's the standout. I just think he was fantastic in this.
Yeah, and I
Well,
think him and I don't know the actor's name, the main character,
Robert
Rob
Ryan.
Ryan. Yeah, I think they play off each other well, even though they probably only have like I don't know 4 scenes together.
Yeah,
Each one of them is just so good that they have that kind of good chemistry between them.
Burl Ives, sorry to undercut this. Burl Ives was in something called the Ewok Adventure, and it looks terrible. I've never even heard of this before.
That sounds like a terrible name.
It's about Ewoks. It's like a Star Wars spin-off.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, "There's no way, right?" Like,
No,
that's
no,
not a
yeah,
thing.
it's literally it's a Star Wars spin-off. That's
a
crazy. I've never even
TV.
heard of this.
It's a TV one.
Must be, yeah. Apparently streaming on Disney Plus. Happy days. I know what I'll be watching later.
You'll have 2 credits on your stats page on Letterboxd for him now.
Yeah.
Um,
But
Yeah.
while we're speaking about Robert Ryan, can we talk about him then for a second while we're on?
Oh, absolutely.
yeah,
So like I've seen him in a few things. We've seen him in House of Bamboo, Bad Day at Black Rock, Clash by Night, and The Wild Bunch, and then this as well. And like I'm trying to remember in House of Bamboo, yeah, he was the lead actor, yeah.
yeah.
And then he's the bad guy in Bad Day at Black Rock, and he's the bad guy in Clash by Night. He's always, except for House of Bamboo, but even then he's kind of morally grey. He's always, this sort of very manly villain, sort of bad guy pulling the strings, that kind of type. So seeing him in this kind of role in Day of the Outlaw was amazing because, as I kind of said earlier, the line between good guys and bad guys in this film is very thin. I wouldn't sit here and say that Blaze is the hero of this movie. He's not your atypical sort of Western hero. Like he's not like a John Wayne type or anything like that. He starts off the film, basically threatening to destroy another farmer's property because the woman he liked married him instead. That's kind of like petty villain shit. That's not something that our heroes of film and whatever tend to do. So this is why I think it's so great casting Robert Ryan in that kind of role, because if you were to have someone like Henry Fonda prior to Once Upon a Time in the West, for example, you wouldn't really take him seriously as that kind of morally grey person. Obviously, that kind of changed after Once Upon a Time in the West, but prior to that, Henry Fonda was always the good guy, so you wouldn't really be able to take him seriously. But that's why Robert Ryan is great in that role, because he's played villains and he's been known for villainous roles. Have him be this morally sort of grey character as the lead is super interesting. It's not something you see a lot, even in film noirs. The lead is normally someone who is either on the side of the law or they're a civilian who's kind of been dragged into the dirt a little bit. They've been kind of drawn along by a femme fatale like Dana Andrews in Double Indemnity, for example. You kind of got dragged into it. Whereas Robert Ryan kind of, leads the charge on his bad stuff, as well as the kind of heroic stuff he does later on in the film. So I think he's great in this film. I love him. I don't think there's another actor who could kind of do the role like he did in this film and be as good.
I think one thing that they kind of make apparent, like when you first see him, is he's a very principled person. Like we learn later in the film that, even when he wakes up that morning, he says he always knows what he wants to do when he wakes up. He understands what his decisions are. He is a man of a lot of convictions. And even when he isn't even sure of himself, he has to be that. It's almost like this masculinity thing to that degree. And so when something important happens, it makes it that much more believable that he would be the man, because he has more conviction than just about anyone else in this town. When you see Like he has a plan, even if it's not necessarily a good one. He at least is going to do something. And so when he kind of takes charge, it feels that much more believable, even though he was just about to shoot one of like 10 people who live in this town.
Yeah. The masculinity aspect's a good thing to talk about with this film because it's full of toxic, masculinity and sort of testosterone fueled mayhem. Like the main sort of conflict in this film is essentially that the outlaws want to rape the women of this town and kill all the men. The only thing holding them back from doing that is Burl Ives' character, the sort of leader of the outlaws, staying alive. So much of the tension is going on. If this dude dies, then all the women in this town are going to get raped. All the men in this town are going to get murdered by these testosterone fueled head cases. They've just been driven mad by this sort of masculinity or toxic masculinity, testosterone, whatever. So it's really interesting to see a film from this era kind of focus on that. It's just not. This is the way I love this film. It's just so unlike anything of its era. You never really had. We kind of talked about this a little bit when we talked about The Hitchhiker last time around, or a couple of episodes ago. How you don't really get films with that kind of psychological depth in this era. But this is another one as well. It's just there's so much that could go wrong so quickly if one little thing happens, one little chain of events. And it's all just down to psychology and, this idea of what these sort of outlaws think is a manly thing to do, which is to attack these women, which obviously it's not. Any sane person can see they're not doing it. But in their minds, this is not wrong. They're like saying, I think one of them says, and this made my skin crawl, one of the outlaws says, I want to make the little one happy. What he means there is I want to rape her, but like he said that I want to make the little one happy, and that just made my skin crawl. But it goes to show what their mindset is. It's so toxic.
So
yeah, and oh, sorry, Chris, you go ahead.
No, go for it.
No, the only thing I was going to note is, it's interesting talking about masculinity in this because I think the thing that makes, we talk about that thin line between like the morally good and the morally bad characters is this very thin line. And I think it's the same thing with like positive masculinity and toxic masculinity. They mention it several times, like Gene, the young one who's in the Outlaws, Captain Braun, who's leader, and of course our main character, aren't that far different from the worst version of it, but they have these principles that kind of do show a positive form of that masculinity, that to be that principled and not just find the parts of masculinity that benefit them. They're very principled people, and they go against even their best interests in many times just to hold those principles because they believe them to be true. Which is what makes it fascinating, especially when we talk about like, the captain is who starts like all this issue, but his death would be the worst thing for this town. Kind of what you were talking about. Like he's the reason they're there, but his living is what's making it from being a lot worse.
So I want to build on that exact point, Zach. So what year, and I'm sorry, make fun of me all you need to. What year did World War II end? Was it 45?
45.
45.
Yeah.
45, right? Okay. So 14 years after World War II, this movie comes out. And I think it's really interesting if you think about it from a World War II perspective. This is a story of soldiers who are the villains, like sweeping through a series of towns and essentially raping and pillaging on their way to some mission. Now, you could say maybe like, they're more like MIA, like they're not necessarily, active military. But I'm curious if this was somehow an attack on, whether it's the play that this was based off of, or the novel or whatever, or the, Philip Jordan is the writer, just his perception, his interpretation of that material, or Andre de Toth was trying to make a point. But I feel like there was a lot of stuff going on in the 50s. It was a reaction to World War II. And I don't know, I couldn't help but bring it up and see what y'all thought, because it didn't feel like an accident.
I listen to my parents talk a lot. My dad was born in the 50s. My mom was born in the early 60s. And one thing I've heard them kind of reference, never talk about directly, but just little things I've picked up on is, obviously winning World War II was the bright spot, was the thing you were happy about, but it's the aftermath. Like, what does the atomic bomb mean? What does that mean for our future? What does that turn us into, sort of idea? And I think there is a little bit of that, just like kind of what Adam was talking about earlier, that thin line between being the good guys and the bad guys. And I think that perspective's here. Obviously, from what I can tell, it's not in color, but it looks like the captain is wearing a Union uniform based on the stripe on his leg. I believe he's a Union soldier.
Okay.
But he's the bad guy. I mean, and most, we talk about today, most people would agree the Union were more in the right than the South was. But he's the bad guy, and obviously he did something terrible to the Mormons in Utah. It's a very
Yeah.
thin line. He was on the right side, but did the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
something that, looking back on World War II, a lot of people could say the same thing, like what we were mentioning about the atomic bomb. You were like, the US were on the Allied side, but that was probably the wrong thing to do. So it's interesting when that bleeds into art. I didn't catch that he was Union. Obviously, I'm not familiar with the uniforms. I wouldn't have known the difference without him explicitly saying what side he was on. So I obviously am only thinking about this now after you said it, Zach. But it's a very good point, and it does boil into the rest of the film being so morally ambiguous. Well, there's very unambiguous, but there's also a lot of ambiguous stuff in here as well.
Yeah, and I mean, the characters, even with Captain, whatever the captain did, I know they don't go in depth. He's obviously a man full of regret as well. Like, even main character talks about, he doesn't, because he's like, you're not going to do anything because you don't want it to be the Battle of the Mormons again.
Yeah.
And it's that carries him, that makes him very sympathetic. Like, even like I said, he's the cause of this, but you still feel bad for him, in some degree, because he seems like he wants to do the right thing, but it's almost like he's too far gone to ever be able to do it.
Which is why I kind of brought up when Chris asked if he was the villain. I wouldn't call him the villain.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't even think the main character. I wish I could remember. Is it Blaze? Is that how you say his name?
Blaze.
Blaze. Thank you. Sorry, Blaze. Like, even when. Oh man, I don't want to spoil. I'll save that point in case we spoil.
The film is like 60, 70 years old. Just spoil it. It's fine.
Okay. I was just going to note, like, when Blaze finally does succumb to his injuries, he insists that they bury him. And I mean, maybe that's strategic for him to,
Oh, sorry. No, Blaze is Robert Ryan's character. You mean the captain? Yeah, I don't remember his name.
Captain passes and Blaze is, we bury him because there's at least some mutual respect there. They were adversaries, but at the end of the day, he respected him in some way.
Mm-hmm.
I think I know exactly. I agree with your point, but I just want to. I think this is the thing that works so well in the film for me. I don't know that by the end of the movie, I would say that they were not adversaries. I think Blaze, the Robert Ryan character, picked up pretty fast that Burl Ives is this dam holding back, like, the flood of rape and revenge or whatever. Like, all the evil that wants to come through this town is all being held up through Burl Ives, right? And so they had a tenuous relationship because I think Captain Brune was trying to walk that line of still looking like the same captain in front of his men in order to sort of hold them back, but not wanting to go through whatever he did to the Mormons again. But I don't think when he died, I don't think it was as adversaries to Blaze. I think they were.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's they were at least knew what had to be done. Like, I mean, at this point, everyone knew, including him, that he wasn't going to be able to hold back Tex and Pace forever. That just wasn't going to happen. They had been talking about a power play pretty much the whole movie.
Mhm.
Yeah, which is why I think Blaze did essentially went on the suicide mission to lead them over the mountains because and this was the kind of the eventual heroic act that Robert Ryan's character did do was to sort of lead them all, including the captain out of the town over the mountains, which was essentially going to be a suicide mission just due to the snow and everything like that. Um, and I think at that point, both Blaze and the captain knew this was the best route, even though they knew they were both probably going to die. At least they weren't going to be in the town where all the mayhem could happen afterwards. So that
Yeah.
was almost like the captain's sort of way of redeeming what happened with the Mormons. He knew he was going to die. Blaze knew he was going to die. Let's just get everyone out of the town before carnage could ensue.
Yeah.
And it's funny we were talking about Two Towers because that's kind of what makes that moment powerful, right? Like men giving up everything to do what's right. It's that positive masculinity type of thing where you're the end result, but you do it anyway because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, it's a real turning point for Robert Ryan's character because he starts off so petty. He's petty, jealous, gonna burn down another man's property because he married the woman he loves. And in the end, he's willing to give her and everything up just to make sure that she's safe and the town is safe. So yeah, it's a big redemption arc for Robert Ryan's character as well, I think.
Yeah, and I think I think the character of Gene is kind of interesting because he's kind of in that in between of he can go either way. Like obviously he respects his captain and he wants to, do right by him, but he also has these doubts of what's the right thing to do. So I think he's very interesting. And at least my reading when he asked him to get off his horse and give it to, I think it was Tex or Pace. It was one of them, whoever lost their horse in that scene. I almost feel like it was the captain saying, go home. Like
Mm,
you're not. This is your opportunity to get out.
mm.
You don't have to be part of this because I mean, he was the youngest one there. He was definitely the most innocent of the ones there, and probably the one that deserved to live at least more than the rest of them did. And
Right.
start making better choices.
Right. This is one thing that so Andre de Toth, maybe this is the perfect segue to talk about him for a moment. So, this guy was Hungarian, right? He his birth name was Toth Andrei Antal Michaeli.
Sure.
And then when he came over here, he changed it to Andre Toth or Andre de Toth. Um, and this feels like, and there's not a lot of comparisons between this film and Fellini movies, but there's one thing that is kind of consistent or similar. And I don't know if this is just like a European thing from that era, but the character, like, morality is complex. That's like the whole point, right? There's no characters that are truly good, truly evil. I mean, at least main characters. There are some pretty evil characters in the film, but the leads are all kind of in this gray area, and that's something that I think it if it's done right, it's a very powerful message because I think it just reflects reality a lot. Like the situation that Rob Ryan was in and that whole town was in it's difficult. Like the weather sucks, right? Like they're in this small kind of town. They don't have a lot of commerce coming through. Like they're all kind of making it, but one bad winter away from losing the farm or whatever. Like there's that whole like they're in this tough environment, and so in the tough environment, it creates a different type of morality because survival becomes less stable. And I think the film did a good job of that. And I don't know if this is extending into the war metaphor from before, or if this is, because war has a lot of these tough environments where you go in and you have to make between two bad choices. But I, I think if it's not that, it's at least true for the Old West, and especially the Old West in the winter.
Yeah, and it's something like I think the Old West. It's always about surviving the heat, but it cuts both ways. Like this Wyoming in the winter, it sucks, and
Ah,
it's just that there's no chance for help. You're kind of on your own, and I think they do, and that's what's great about like the whole landscape we were talking about at the beginning, like you feel that loneliness.
Yeah. Yeah,
No.
exactly.
So I did actually have one complaint about the film, and I wanted to see what you guys thought about it. Him living at the end. I think that was the only mistake the movie made.
Yeah, I can understand why. Why? What's the point of this grand gesture of sacrifice if he didn't actually sacrifice anything in the end?
Yeah.
I can see where you're coming from. That it kind of undercuts that emotionally, and yeah, I would have been fine if he didn't make it out. I thought, it would have resonated emotionally that he did actually go ahead with this sort of sacrificial gesture. I also don't mind that he lived. I think the only problem I think with him living maybe is that the film just kind of goes back to square one, where he wants the girl, and it's probably going to go back to attacking the husband again. Like, how does anyone kind of move on from what just happened? How does any of this change? But at the same time, it's not going to keep me up bugging me at night.
Yeah.
But I certainly see where you're coming from, though.
And I wonder, I was sitting there wondering if it's like, is it the era this comes out in? Like, if this comes out 20 years later, is he dead? Like,
even 10.
Yeah. Like,
yeah, I think so. Like, there's a famous Fritz Lang film called The Woman in the Window, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's a film that I wish ended 2 minutes earlier than it did for very similar reasons. And I remember really being frustrated at the ending of this movie. And I was reading it, and it was studio interference. They basically made him end it differently. So it could have been very similar here, where Robert Ryan's the big name, the headline name. We don't want to kill him. Just make him survive. It could have been something like that.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, it's still a phenomenal film. Like this, I think I was trying to think about it. I was like, I think this is the first time we've all been like heavily praised the movie, maybe since Night of the Hunter. So apparently 50s black and white films is where we're all going to meet our middle ground.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's funny because I don't typically like 50s is the worst era of filmmaking for me.
Well, that's what I thought too, but it's like, man, we're all agreeing on it.
I love the 50s.
Yeah, you would, Adam.
It's all the new war. It's all the new war.
Yeah, I do love the 50s.
No, and I typically don't like the 50s for the reasons we're just talking. It was such a big on like the Hollywood ending. But
everyone got so far up their own arse though in the 60s. So
I don't know. I guess
that film
that's where
score really came in.
Yeah.
That's where I like to hang out, I guess. No, the 60s was transitional. I think there's good stuff. The 70s for me is the best, not the 60s. There's a lot of really good movies in the 60s, but 70s for me was like where it really hit.
Yeah, well, If It'll Only came out in the 50s, and that's the best Fellini film, so there we go.
Do we have to do this now?
Debate. I can't even say anything. I've never even seen one.
No, If It'll Only is awesome. Not the best, but it's a fantastic movie. Yeah, the only other thing I want to mention is, we're going to talk about strong women in for sure in the second film, but Tina Louise. So I don't know if this is just the way I grew up, if this is considered child abuse or whatever, but I've never seen an episode of Gilligan's Island. So I had no reference point for Tina Louise.
I didn't put together she was in Gilligan's Island.
She was somebody called Ginger.
Yeah. Now that you say it, I'm like, oh, okay, that is her. I didn't even realize.
Okay, got it. Okay, well, I feel a little bit better then. Yeah, because she's one of these famous A-list celebrity types, but I think she was fantastic in this. I think she had a strong presence on screen, and her character was probably, it's not fair to compare it to the female lead from the next film we're about to talk about, but for what she was asked to do in this kind of film, she really held her own with any of the actors on the screen, and I think her performance was amazing.
And Charles really filmed her very well. Like, photographed her great, like with the whole black, what do you call that, a cloak, like against the snow and everything else. It looked great.
I'm so confused. I'm just looking at Tina Luisa's filmography. They made a sequel to Rosemary's Baby.
Did they really?
It's called Look What's Happened to Rosemary's Baby. What the
Oh,
fuck?
I'm looking. I'm adding that now.
Yeah, I wish I hadn't already
Oh my
chosen.
God. Having been adopted by the madam of a southwestern brothel, and now adult Adrian must cope with the fact that he's Satan's kid and not living up to his expectations. This sounds awful.
1.8 on Letter.
Oh my God.
Oh
Also,
man,
just the yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna say this is Vinegar Syndrome waiting to happen. They look
Oh, yeah.
this would be perfect for them.
Yeah, the title just the title indicates what bad creative choice. Look what happened to Rosemary's Baby is the title. Oh my God.
There we
Wait a
go.
minute. Oh, it's based off a book, Son of Rosemary. Interesting. Even Son of Rosemary is a better title, I think. But
Better title, but they had to get the Rosemary's Baby part in there. I don't know.
look what happened to Rosemary's Baby. Oh, that is amazing. Um,
Terrible.
that's
He
up
was
there
an
with
editor
Psycho
for
2.
Rosemary's Baby and Chinatown, by the way. The guy who directed it.
We
He was
need
that?
he
to.
was Polanski's editor.
I wish I had
Poor
not chosen my films for next week because
Could be
This-
watching this.
yeah, this and Psycho 2 would be a fantastic week one time. Okay, I'll note that for later.
At least one of them will be good.
I've heard that Psycho 2 is not good.
What? Are you serious? I like
Oh,
Psycho.
no,
2.
no. I'm sorry. I'm saying Psycho. I'm sorry. The Birds.
Oh, okay. I was like, dude, Psycho 2 is awesome.
No. I'm sorry. No, I'm saying Psycho. Freudian slip. The Birds. The Birds 2.
Well, the
Okay.
Birds one isn't even that good, so that's probably a fair assumption.
Yeah, I mean it's not my favorite Hitchcock. I actually thought about rewatching it, but yeah, maybe later. All right, so after we just got done with Day of the Outlaw, we're going to jump right back into our second feature. This is another snowy western. This is by Robert Altman, the famous director who made things such as Images, probably his best work. Called Miss A gambler and a prostitute become business partners in a remote Old West mining town, and their enterprise thrives until a large corporation arrives on the scene. So, Adams, well, actually, we'll get Chris. Where is this one at on our site? Well, not we keep saying Sightings now. They Shoot Pictures list.
Yes, it is top. Do y'all want to guess, or do you want me to just tell you just to make it quick?
Knowing this film, I'm guessing it's in the top 500. I don't agree with it, but I'm guessing it's in the top 500.
Oh,
I was
good,
going
we're
to say
have some-
8, like 800. Sorry,
Oh, I thought you meant 8.
no, like 800. Sorry.
It is definitely in the top 500. In fact, it's 195,
Wow.
just behind Raiders of the Lost Ark, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and Solaris. And then just ahead of Knights of Cabiria, Chungking Express, and Umberto
No,
D.
no.
Well, Chungking Express isn't that good. So.
I will burn this podcast to the ground.
We only made it through 2022. Anyways, yeah, that's so 195.
That's very
Well-
high. Like I actually don't. I actually like this film. I think it's good. That's way too fucking high.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it in top 200. I do really like this movie, though. I feel like I like it more than Adam does, but it's still not top 195.
Why don't
Yeah.
you just you're in the middle of a point though, Zach. What else did you want to say as we were getting started here?
Well, I was going to say, since this was Adam's pick, I'd like to see it because I know this was a kind of a blind watch for him. So I'd like to
Yeah.
hear if it was the right call for him to pair this with Outlaw.
Yeah, I think it was a good pairing because they're like Day of the Outlaw. This is not a typical Western.
Yeah.
Not just because it's snowy, but just in terms of the general plot and things like that. It's not very typical. Like Day of the Outlaw, it always takes place in one little town. There's not really about much in terms of exploration. Very little murdering of Indians, which I know John Ford must have fucking hated. But yeah, like honestly, I just thought it was fine. I wasn't that engrossed with the story all that much. One thing I did love was the production design. Like the little village they built and the costumes and everything like that was amazing. The production designer did a top-notch job sort of creating, the authenticity. It felt like just went back in time with some cameras and just shot whatever time frame this is. I assume late 1800s, early 1900s, maybe at a push. But yeah, like in terms of the actual plot and stuff, I wasn't too pushed. Warren Beatty's character is kind of annoying, to be honest with you. I just find him a bit. I don't know. He's probably supposed to be like that, but yeah, I just found Warren Beatty's character a bit annoying. I don't think Julie Christie is given enough to do. She's a really great actress, and I think she's kind of sidelined a little bit, even though she has such a crucial role in the film. I feel like she's not in the film enough, and yeah, the story just didn't engage me. But film looks spectacular, looks great, production design's amazing, the music's really good. I really enjoyed the songs from Leonard Cohen.
That's always a win.
So
Leonard Cohen's always a win.
it's a pretty solid 4-star for me. I appreciate it. I think it's a well-made film, but I'm probably not going to rewatch it anytime soon.
What about you, Chris? What did you think?
So I probably like Altman the most from this group. I guess I haven't heard specifically your take, Zach, but I
Well,
love
to be
him.
fair with Altman, like I don't hate Altman. I just hate images. And
Oh.
I actually hate images because it's Altman, and I expect more from him.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So that's
Okay.
I definitely don't hate Altman. I love True Women's a great film, and I really enjoyed. Is it the Long Goodbye? I always
Yeah,
mix up
yeah.
the Long Goodbye and the Long Good Friday. The Long Goodbye is the one with Monica and
Elliot Gould. Yeah,
Elliot Gould, yeah, Monica and what's his name's dad from Friends, yeah. Yeah, I like that film a lot as well. So I saw those two first, and then I saw Images, and I was like, "What the fuck is this shit?" But yeah, I don't have a problem with Robert Altman. I think he's a good director.
So
Apparently, Gould was supposed to be the main character for McCabe originally, but the studio said no.
I think they actually got the casting right. I don't think Gould in The Long Goodbye is one of my favorite performances. That guy is awesome, but I don't think he's right for this. I like Warren Beatty for this, and I'll make his defense here in a minute. Just in terms of Altman's career, so he had just finished MASH, which was, I know some people don't like it now, but at the time it was a huge hit. Obviously spun off the TV show, and then this was his next movie. Funny enough, right after this was Images, and then right after that was Long Goodbye, California Split. So I think early on in his career, he was kind of just trying to figure out his style, right? And then his traditional like Altman style, it was like MASH, this, and then Nashville, and then you probably start looking all the way until, just looking down, I mean, The Player is almost 20 years later before you start getting into things like Gosford Park, these kind of movies that he's known for in that way. But I love, first of all, Leonard Cohen is the right choice. I think this movie is, whatever you think about it, I think it's another star, half star, just because of Leonard Cohen. I love the music in this. It's so perfect for like that kind of like, anti-Western movie in a way. Because this, his character, McCabe, would typically be like a character in a Western with a real lead, right? You don't see Westerns with somebody like Warren Beatty in the lead. Like, think about him, like, the one we just talked about, Rob Ryan, Burl, like where would McCabe even fit into that? He'd be the owner of a brothel or of a casino or whatever, right? But he wouldn't be the main character. So the whole way this is constructed, even from the beginning, I think is kind of cool. And I love the choice of Leonard Cohen. And I love that Altman style where people are kind of talking over each other almost in a whisper. Like there's not a lot of silence in a Altman film when he does this way. But there's also not a lot of unnecessary chatter. I think he just creates like a real, like an authentic environment pretty well. So I just immediately kind of sunk into, because I'd never seen this before, so I just immediately sunk into like, oh, this is going to be one of these good Altman style movies that I like. And then the way that it went, I'll save this point for later when we talk about Julie Christie, but I think her role was, uh, I think you called it out right, Adam, and I think there's a reason for it. I think she was underutilized because this was not a story about her. This is a story about this idiot, and he was shown to be an idiot. And so I think that they used her really well to kind of highlight that. But I'll stop there for a minute. But yeah, I think this movie was great. I don't know if it got 4 or 4.5 for me. We may have ended in the same spot. But I really like this movie a lot.
Yeah, so I did want to highlight where you were talking about, where McCabe is an idiot. But the one thing I think the film does so well, and I think why I like it, and I really enjoyed it this time around, this is my second time watching it, was the fact that Altman was so good at making him such a character so easy to underestimate. And even the audience underestimates him. So there's that scene later on when the guy kind of says, he's never killed anyone. That whole story about what was his name? Bob Roundtree, whatever his last name, whatever his first name was.
Yeah.
And they never confirm what happened directly, but you kind of figure out by the end everything that was said about him probably did have some truth in it. Like, you, even as the audience, when he says that, like, yeah, he's probably right. This guy's never done anything. This guy couldn't actually kill anyone. And by the end, it kind of comes as a weird shock because you're like, oh, he's at least somewhat more capable than we give him credit for. Now, obviously, doesn't always work out for him, but I would say he's more capable than I think anyone in the film gives him credit for.
Maybe. Okay, I want to talk about that. But I want to hear. I'm curious what. I'm wondering if we should start before we get into that for a second. So just by the way of giving like a quick kind of background. So we basically watch him come into this town, right, and immediately set up a poker game. And it becomes obvious from the beginning that he has kind of an enigmatic presence, right? People are drawn to him. He's the best dressed in the lot of some mountain, miners or whatever, I don't know, farmers, whatever, but like it's a motley crew, right? So he comes in, kind of sets up this brothel and a gambling house. And then pretty soon after, somebody who's even more polished comes through, right? Which is Julie Christie, Miss Miller. She comes through and basically makes a compelling argument to him that she can double his money or whatever if he builds her a house for her women. So she sets up what's a real rustic kind of brothel. It's literally intense. And then she sets up like a house, like a really nice house where you have to take a bath and like the women are clean and like it's like a generational leap in quality for that particular service, a regional service that she's providing. And then you see in the movie how he is not listening to her or listening to her begrudgingly, and then his arrogance gets him into trouble, and then the ending of the movie is sort of like the outpouring of that trouble that he gets into. And so y'all correct me if I miss anything important, but Zach, the only reason I'm hesitating when you say people underestimate him is I get what you're saying, and I think the film is certainly set up that way, but I think the way that the movie ends, he's kind of laid bare as not really knowing what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, he's very much he's not thinking two steps ahead. That is just not who he is as a character. He is taking it as it is, just like when those men offer him money. The one thing I will say is, while I think a lot of people say, well, he's dumb for not taking the offer or anything else like that, there's also that old saying in business that if somebody tells you you have to make a decision right now, don't make it. because obviously they know something you don't. I actually think he may, ignoring the fact that, what their alternative is if he says no, ignoring that, somebody comes to you and says, we'll offer you this much, but you have to say yes right now. You say no, because obviously there's money to be made, and he knows that. It seems dumb in hindsight because of what they do when he says no, but I think in the vacuum, he's making the business call that he believes is right, because he can probably make more money than they're offering him if he's willing to stick with it.
This is what I find so weird about the character, and it's probably written this way, but it just kind of annoyed me, or rubbed me the wrong way. Is that like there's some parts, especially like the start when he first rolls into town and everything like that, where he gives off the air of like a con man, that yeah, like you said before, he's very well dressed, looks better than everybody else, seems to be intelligent, he's good at poker, all this kind of stuff. So you initially think, okay, maybe he's a con man, and then it turns out no, he's just really lucky and just kind of dumb, and he's easily manipulated. But then he does other things, like you just said there, Zach, where he turns down the money, or turns down the initial offer, which kind of thing make you think, okay, maybe he does know what's going on. And it's just that kind of jumping back and forth, it just kind of threw me a lot. It reminds me of and I think I've said this quote before on this podcast, but there's an Irish film called The Guard with Brendan Gleeson and Don Cheadle.
Yeah, you
And
mentioned it. Yeah.
Yeah, and Don Cheadle has this line in the film addressing Brendan Gleeson where he says, I can't tell if you're really motherfucking dumb or really motherfucking smart.
Uh-huh.
And that's how I feel about McCabe as well. Which I know maybe that's the point, but it just kind of annoyed me a little bit that I wasn't able to pin him down as a character. And it just came across, maybe, I don't know, maybe it was a problem in the writing or something, I'm not too sure. I know I'm on I'm in the minority when it comes to this kind of stuff with this film. But yeah, it just didn't sit right with me personally. It just kind of annoyed me a little bit.
I think I definitely understand what you're saying. It almost feels like a consistency issue. And I think for me, the moment that it sells me more of he's closer to the smarter end of the spectrum than the dumb end of the spectrum, where you don't know what's true and what's a lie when it comes to his past, is with that being vague, when he pulls out a Derringer pistol right at the end, and I'm like, oh, so was true. All of that was true. And yeah, he's pretty much lost at that point. But you would at least say, well, I'm trying to think of a good thing. It's almost like he's the survivor type. Like he's just the type that's his main goal. And it worked out for him until it didn't.
So this is probably the best time to kind of jump into the one of the big points I wanted to make about this, and one of the reasons I like it so much. And I think it has to do with the way that we can't fully grasp. I mean, even the three of us here can't fully grasp if he's an idiot or a genius. And this is what I felt the whole movie. This is the Silicon Valley entrepreneur story.
Okay.
Like this is, it's almost prophetic in the way that it's written. Like this is 100% what happens in tech startups, where you get a emboldened founder. And if you think about it from one perspective, it's insane to have a 24-year-old kid, guy or girl, mostly white guy, but anyways, just 24, 25-year-old kid, ask a bunch of people to follow them as they're building something that's gonna like change the world, and then go ask people that have lots of money for money to support this vision, and then go build that thing. But for the ones who kind of get it off the ground, they need somebody like a Mrs. Miller to come in and kind of help take it to that next level. So you might say like a Series A to a Series B round of financing. But one of the biggest struggles that these founders have is knowing when to exit. Do you go the public route? Do you IPO? And do you try to get that on the stock market? It can have big payout for the founders, but it can also have some disastrous effects on the team and the morale, and people don't like the way that you have to do all of a sudden now you're like reporting quarterly to Wall Street, and some businesses don't operate well on quarterly kind of earnings basis. Or do you go take another big round of money and see if you can grow to a point where you can get even bigger? Or do you let sales kind of fuel growth? You make all these decisions, and about 90% of the time founders make the wrong decision, or 95%, whatever it is. There's some startling number of startups that fail. We only hear about the ones that make it, but maybe because I'm biased because that's the world that I kind of come from. But like this, I was hooked because like I recognized him. I've seen McCabe before many times. Like I just felt like this was written. It's insane to me that this was written in the 60s. Because I feel like, or 71, I guess, whatever. I don't know exactly when it was written, but this is the entrepreneur story. And even in the story, he is an entrepreneur, right? And this is the story of an entrepreneur that ended up in a shootout in the snow without the businesses that he helped build. So he didn't quite make it, but it could go either way. It's a coin toss, and that's what I love so much about this film.
Yeah, honestly, that's a great point. I didn't really consider it from that angle, but that is actually pretty cool. Now that I think about it.
Yes, it's an interesting reading, especially the way the big corporation comes in to try and take over. That happens a lot in tech startups as well. You get a big offer from someone like Google to buy your business, and it's about whether you take the money or not.
Yeah.
Do you sell? Do you sell while you're hot, or do you stay and try and keep growing? And there's obviously countless stories of people who've turned down hundreds of millions of dollars for their website or whatever, and all for it to just end up going under a few years later, and you think, shit, I should have sold. So yeah, I think it's an interesting reading of the film.
And that's that, or even tens of millions of dollars, right? For the founder, that's life-changing money. And for Miss Miller, like she this is why, kind of to go back to the point, Adam. So this is why I think it's her role is written well. If she had been in it more, it would be a story about her, which it should have been. And she played a massive role in the success of McCabe. But this was a story about McCabe. Her name was second, and it shouldn't have been. And that's why I kind of like the story. It felt to me like that's more often the way that things go. Like she comes in with the vision, sets up the business, makes it successful. That scene where she opens up her case and it shows the first week's earnings, and he's just like blown away. Like in all of that, she should have had a more prominent role, but she doesn't, because it's just kind of the way things work. And I don't know, because she's a woman or because it's technically his business, but the person who's running it very rarely gets the same credit.
Okay, so you're basically saying the reason she can't really be in it more is because if she's helping making decisions, there is no story. Like the story is that he won't make the best decision at the time.
Exactly. Like he's an idiot. That's the story, or whatever you want to say. He's a visionary type who's on the edge, and as every one of his decisions is made with an extreme amount of hubris, and it's a 50-50 decision. And we see one instance where it didn't work the way that he would have wanted.
Yeah, he's definitely, and I guess that's the thing with showing him at the beginning being a gambler. That is pretty much his whole life.
Yeah.
He's gambling everything he's got, every chance he gets.
Yeah.
And I think like in the first scene, if I remember correctly, he tells him, he doesn't like to quit when he's losing because he wasn't winning at poker at the beginning.
Great call out. Yeah. So this is why I don't mind it. Honestly, 195 is probably a little high for me, but I don't mind this being a highly rated film. In anyways, that's my argument for why I really like it. Actually, I don't know what I'm gonna end up rating this. I forgot that I hadn't done that yet. It's different than Battle Heater.
Is it ever going to be as good as Battle Heater though?
That's the big question.
Yeah. This isn't anything deep or insightful. I just think this line's funny, and I just wanted to call it out. Was the part where he first meets the guy Sears, when he introduces himself, and he's like, "Oh, I'm Roebuck, who's watching the store." I just think that's great.
Yeah. That was really good.
Yeah, and he does have like some witty parts, but you know, I think it's also funny. There's a part where Miss Miller calls him out and sarcastically calls him the frontier wit or something like that, where
Yeah.
it's very much he thinks he's wittier than he really is, even if he does have a couple good lines from time to time.
Yeah. No, totally. And that's, well, anyways, I don't want to be too, what's it called? I don't know, kick a dead horse or whatever. I don't know what the nice way to say that is now. I don't really want to kick dead horses, but that's just that visionary type, that entrepreneur leader. Like there's so many parallels in the character. Like we could talk for another hour on this point, but I just like, this is the thing. Like for if Mark Zuckerberg, and he's been proven to be insane, but let's just go back to 2007 or whatever, 2005, it's 50-50 shot, and it's a 5% shot that he becomes what Facebook became, or maybe even a percent of a percent chance that he became that. But even just to have a decent exit at, let's just say that at the time MySpace decided that they should buy Facebook and just kind of figure out how to bring these two worlds together, and he exited for $20 million. That's still life-changing money for Zuckerberg, right?
Yeah.
But he gambled, and I guess at least financially he made the right decision for himself. But a lot of, for everyone like that does, there's also Blockbuster, right, which had a pretty good run and doesn't exist, or I mean whatever, and there's a million startups that never make it out of Series A. So Adam, you're being very quiet. Did I convince you to love this movie?
No, I like your reading of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like your reading of the movie, but yeah, and like I said, I didn't not like it.
That's true. You said 4 stars. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's fine. It's a well-made movie. It's well constructed. I just thought the characters were a bit annoying.
The one thing I did, I almost forgot to talk about this. One thing I thought was interesting, that near the end of the film, we get to see inside the church, and we actually see the near completion of the church at the beginning of the film. But what's kind of interesting is the church is still being built after he is so established. Like it kind of shows how much the town probably went from like this very church centric town that he comes in with his brothel, bathhouse, or whatever. And that's booming. Like it got completed quickly. Honestly, he built the business twice, because the first one doesn't really work out because the prostitute stabs somebody. And it's kind of, I thought that was very interesting to see. Like it almost seems like that's how the town changed as well. And of course, we see characters who come from far out just to come see this bathhouse, and the church is just kind of left destitute at that point, only being there with the priest.
I love that call out, because when she brings the money in for the first week's earnings, that's essentially tithe money, right? I mean, in the sense that that money can only go to one place in the town, and it's going to her in that instance.
Yeah, and it's almost like the church no longer has an ability to finish her, and of course it ends up burning.
Interesting.
Which great effect. I just want to note the great shotgun effect from that was great. But yeah, it ends up burning, being destroyed, and actually at the same time that business is pretty much destroyed too. Like the whole town is pretty much gone. Anything they could have had is gone, and anything they were having is gone.
Yeah.
So you actually just reminded me something that I thought about during the end. That I was thinking about, just regarding something that McCabe or Mrs. Miller had said to McCabe kind of early in the film, about how the girls, will go to church. If I can't remember what it was, if they're left alone, they'll go to church and they'll never come back. Something along those lines, anyway.
Oh, Yeah.
And I just found it funny at the end of the film, there's this big McCabe's in this shootout, but nobody runs to help him. Everyone runs to the church instead of running to help him. Like there's gunfire going off, so people like obviously know there's some shooting going on. It's not like, it's taking place miles away from where everything's happening. But instead of everybody running to McCabe, everyone runs to the church to help that rather than him. So I just thought that was a nice little call back to that line from Mrs. Miller earlier in the film.
And we even get to see the prostitutes carry the water to the church.
Exactly.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I didn't notice that. That's cool.
Yeah, just when I was watching, I was like, oh, that's very clever. It's like all the cleverness for the script of this film got sucked out of him, and that's why Images is so shit. So yeah, there you go. Interesting. But I did like the ending. The ending's phenomenal, just in terms of how it looks. Like I said, that shotgun effect where that dude's arm gets blown off, it's pretty awesome. So yeah, I did like the ending of this film. It's a really, really well constructed ending. So that just about wraps up discussion episodes for 2022. It's been fun. We've watched some interesting films. The format has changed a couple of times, and we've grown with it. It's been interesting. The last episode of this year is going to be out, I believe, on the 30th, I think is the Friday. Yeah, the 30th of December is going to be the last episode for this year. It's going to be a wrap-up episode like we did last year. We're just going to be talking about some of our favorite films, our favorite segments, that kind of thing. So that's going to be out on the 30th before we get back into normal programming then in January from 2023. Obviously, nothing's sort of changed really for the most part. We're still going to have our discussion episodes, still going to have our interview episodes. We are going to have those extra episodes coming out every month as well that we'll get into a bit more in the new year. But for now, Chris, do you want to tell folks what the first discussion episode of the new year is going to be?
Yes, I would. So I was trying to figure out how to do this. And, one of the things I've been interested in recently, especially after the conversation with Mawu Films, that came out, I guess, about 2 weeks ago, by the time that this airs, 2 to 3 weeks ago, was this idea of African cinema. And the only name I really knew was Ousmane Sembène, at least by name. So I was kind of digging around, and I found this author and creator and poet and composer, that the only movie I knew from him was Tuki Buki. But his name is Djibril Diop Mambéty, and he's also from Senegal, which I believe Ousmane Sembène is from Senegal as well. And Senegal is an interesting place. It's a French-speaking colony. It's directly below Mauritania, which is directly below Morocco, which is directly below Europe. So it's just a straight line from Spain down to Dakar, which is the capital. It's I would say not a very Western country, at least by reputation. It's more conservative, but it still has a lot of European influence. As I read a little bit about Tuki Buki, it actually is a story about hyenas is somewhere in the title. I can't remember the exact title. I can find it in a second. So it's interesting that the two films he made, this Tuki Buki, which has a translation into hyenas, and then the other film that I want to recommend for us is actually called Hyenas. So, it seems like he revisited this theme. There's a nice parallel in Tuki Buki. I to be honest, I haven't seen the film, but part of the narrative is that this, either like a couple or a brother and sister, or this boy and this girl want to go to Paris. And so there's a theme in the movie about them wanting to go to Paris. And I did notice that Mambéty actually died in Paris. So it seems like he got there. So there's a nice little story there. Look, we don't talk a lot about African filmmakers, and they don't get a lot of distribution. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to start there and see what these films are about.
Sounds good. I've been a big fan of African cinema for a while now. I've seen Tuki Buki before about 2 years ago, so interested to revisit it. I'm looking forward to Hyenas. Obviously, I've seen some Ousmane Sembène films as well. Obviously, we watched Soleil O before, also, which is a great film. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to revisiting Tukibuki and watching Hyenas for the first time.
Oh, you know what? That's a good point. Med Hondo, right?
Yeah,
That's a good point. Where is he from? Oh, he's from Mauritania. Well, there we go.
Mauritania. Yeah,
So Mauritania and Senegal. So it seems like the west coast of Africa is where a lot of what we're talking about so far.
it's
Um,
the sort of French, so that the French former colonies seems to,
yeah.
yeah, that'll do it. Tukibuki, you see? Have you seen Tukibuki, Chris? I know Zach definitely hasn't.
No,
So
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
Don't judge.
It's I'm gonna annoy Zach when I say it's very much Goddard in Africa.
Oh, goody.
So yeah,
There's a
you'll enjoy
there's a
that.
really cool, this is, we don't have to make it part of the official podcast, but if you'll have a chance, there's a really cool interview where Membeti gives an interview I guess to his film class. I'm not sure why they shot it, but he kind of gets into the process of filmmaking from his angle. It's on YouTube. It's about, I don't know, 5 minutes or 10 minutes. It's really interesting though, because he has no formal training. He just picked up a camera and kind of started filming. But he's an incredibly smart guy. It's very clear. So anyways, it's a cool, if you have 5 or 10 minutes, just type in Mumbeti interview. It's the first one that pops up for me at least.
Cool.
But give some good background into him. But yeah, there you go. So 2023, let's go Africa. And Morocco's in the World Cup still, I think, as of this recording.
Yeah,
So we'll see if maybe this is the year of Africa.
yeah.